In the forgotten village of Umidim, where red earth met dark skies, lived a man named Oba, known for his hunger, not for food, but for wealth. Oba was not a wicked man, but his eyes often burned with dreams of gold, cattle, fine clothes, and the power to make others bow. Unlike others who toiled in the farms or carved out clay pots for trade, Oba believed his fate lay in riches too grand for soil and sweat. "I was born for more," he often said, even as his roof leaked in his. Goats wandered into neighbors' yards. One evening, while the village celebrated the harvest moon, Oba wandered into the dark grove behind his compound, drawn by a whisper only he could hear. The whisper grew into a voice, silky and cold. Oba had hissed, "I know what you seek." Oba turned sharply, heart thudding, but saw no one. Only the long shadow cast behind him by the flickering festival fires. "Who's there?" he called, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill. "You want gold, power, freedom from want," the voice said again, as the wind blew strangely backward. A tall figure stepped out from behind a tree, a man-shaped being with no face, wearing a robe of moving smoke. "What are you?" Oba whispered. "A buyer," the being replied. "And I want your shadow." Oba frowned. "My shadow?" "Yes, that thin, worthless thing behind you. You never use it. I will give you gold, land, and cattle in exchange." Oba laughed nervously. "This is madness. Who buys a man's shadow?" "Those who know its worth," the figure said, reaching into its robe and pulling out a small bag of cowries and gold dust that shimmered in the moonlight. Oba's eyes widened. He imagined building a palace, marrying 5 wives, and walking with chiefs at his side. "How do you take it?" he asked, voice trembling. "Just step into my circle," said the being, drawing a perfect ring in the red soil with a bone-white finger. Oba hesitated for only a heartbeat, then stepped into the circle. A cold wind howled, and Oba felt something rip from his back, like a part of his skin had been peeled off. He collapsed, gasping, as the shadow rose from the ground like smoke, curling into the figure's outstretched hand. "Pleasure doing business," the faceless being said, vanishing into the darkness with Oba's shadow fluttering behind him. Oba awoke the next morning in his hut, and beside him was a chest filled with gold, fine robes, and ivory bracelets. His laughter echoed through the village. "Oba the rich man has risen." Within a moon's cycle, he built the grandest house. In Umidim, hired guards, and walked with a cane tipped in gold. He gave large offerings to the gods, and even paid off the debt of the village chief, earning the elders' praise. But there was something strange. Whenever Oba walked in the sun, the ground beneath him was empty. No shadow followed him. Children noticed first. "Mama, look. Oba has no shadow." Mothers pulled their children away. Old men looked twice and crossed themselves. "It is a trick," Oba would say, "a side effect of magic." But deep down, he felt hollow, like something important was missing. At night, he heard whispers outside his compound. They called his name, not lovingly, but accusingly. "Oba, Obeah." He would jump from his bed, sword drawn, but see only moonlight and the tall, empty place where a shadow should have been. The women he courted began to avoid him. "He is handsome, yes," they said, "but something about him feels wrong." His gold brought him no peace. Food tasted like dust. Music sounded dull. Even laughter around him felt distant. One morning, he visited the village shrine. "Diviner," he said, "something stalks me. I cannot rest." The old diviner stared at him and gasped. "Where is your shadow?" "Gone," Obo admitted. "I sold it for riches." The diviner screamed and fell back. "You fool. You sold your anchor. A man without a shadow is a leaf in the wind, doomed to drift into madness." Obo laughed nervously. "That's superstition, old man." But the diviner wept. "You have cursed yourself, and you will not be the only one to suffer." That night, the wind howled again, and Oba saw it. The shadow, outside his compound, watching him from the wall. It no longer lay flat on the ground. It stood, tall, dark, and with eyes like empty pits. It mimicked his movements mockingly, dancing when he cried, still when he moved. "I want my shadow back." Oba screamed, but the figure only grinned. With invisible teeth, villagers began to fall ill. Crops withered, the sky stayed gray, and the rivers ran slower. "Oba has cursed us," they whispered. "He traded something holy." Ashamed and afraid, Oba set out on a journey to find the faceless buyer and take back what he never should have sold. Oba packed no gold, no food, and no servants. Only a gourd of water and a staff carved with his father's name. He walked toward the cursed forest, where the wind spoke in riddles and the trees leaned as if listening. For 3 days and nights, Oba wandered without rest, haunted by strange dreams and whispers that followed his steps. On the fourth night, as he slept beneath a twisted tree, a voice came again, low and cold. "You seek what you gave away," it murmured. "But shadows do not return willingly." Oba sat up. Before him stood an old woman with eyes as pale as ash, draped in bones and feathers. "Who are you?" he asked, exhausted. "I am the Bone Mother. I gather what the world discards: bones, dreams, shadows." Oba fell to his knees. "Can you help me find mine?" She studied him silently, then nodded. "There is a path, but it is steeped in pain, loss, and truth." "I accept," he said without hesitation. She took out a small calabash and drew blood from her palm, whispering into the gourd before handing it to Oba. "Drink this, and you will walk between worlds. But beware, your shadow remembers everything you ever hid." Oba drank. The world spun, turned upside down, and folded like cloth. When he opened his eyes, he stood in a world of smoke and echoes, where trees bled ink and rivers whispered names. His footsteps made no sound. Behind him, still, there was no shadow. Strange creatures with stitched eyes and glass teeth watched him from behind floating trees. In the distance, atop a hill of broken mirrors, stood a dark palace, its roof shaped like a skull. Oba walked toward it, feeling heavier with every step, like the air itself resisted him. Inside the palace, a throne sat empty. Behind it, a great mirror reflected nothing. "You came," a voice echoed. "The man without a tail." Oba turned, and there it was. His shadow, walking upright, draped in black, its face his own but twisted with cruelty. "You left me," the shadow said. "Sold me. Traded me like a cow." "I was foolish," Oba said, blinded by greed. "And now you crawl back, begging for what you threw away?" The shadow sneered. Yes," Oba whispered. "Because without you, I am not whole." The shadow laughed, a sound like wind through dry bones. "Then earn me." With a wave of its hand, the palace crumbled. Oba fell into darkness, landing in a pit filled with masks. Each mask bore a face: his mother's, his friends', the chief's, even his own. The shadow's voice echoed above. "Pick the truth, or remain in lies forever." Oba walked among the masks, each whispering words he had spoken or wished to forget. One mask wept, crying, "You promised never to steal again." Another whispered, "You lied to the widow. You laughed when her child starved." Oba fell to his knees. The truth of who he had been overwhelmed him. He picked the mask of himself as a child, eyes full of wonder, barefoot, chasing fireflies. The pit dissolved, and he found himself in his childhood hut, his mother cooking yam, singing gently. "Mama," he whispered. She looked up and smiled. "You've come back from the long road." "I lost myself," he wept. "I sold my shadow." She touched his chest. "Then remember who you were before the hunger." Light exploded from her hands, and suddenly, Oba stood before the mirror throne again. His shadow watched silently. "You've seen your truth," the shadow said. "Now, answer this. Why should I return?" Oba stepped forward. "Not for wealth, not for pride, but because I accept every sin, every failure, and I will carry them." The shadow blinked. "Even the shame?" "Especially the shame." The shadow walked forward. "Then we are one again." It stepped into him. The room filled with wind and screams and silence. Oba awoke at the base of the twisted tree. The Bone Mother was gone. But beside him, in the morning sun, stretched his shadow, long and dark. He wept with joy and pain, for now, he remembered everything. Oba rose from the earth like a man reborn. The shadow behind him steady, faithful, and whole once more. He walked back to Umidim, not with the arrogance of a rich man, but with the quiet humility of one who had wrestled with his soul. The journey back was long, and he no longer commanded the winds or called for gold to ease his steps. The road greeted him with dust and sweat, and he embraced both like old friends. When he reached the village gates, the guards who once bowed at his wealth now drew their spears. You bring misfortune, they said. Since you left, goats stopped birthing, children fell ill, and dreams vanished. Oba knelt before them. Then let me bring healing. I was the cause. I must also be the cure. They brought him before the council of elders, who looked upon him with wary eyes. You sold your shadow, the oldest said. And because of that, the balance was broken. Oba nodded. I went to the land beneath the land. I faced what I was, and I brought it home. Words are wind, another elder said. Proof is thunder. Oba stood in the center of the square and stepped into the morning sun. For the first time in many moons, a shadow fell behind him, tall, rooted, and unbroken. A gasp rose from the villagers. Children clapped. The wind shifted. The river that had dried began to trickle again. Birds returned to the sky. The scent of rain lingered.